Welcome to Stress Mess, a stressless podcast where the chaos is real, the caffeine is strong, and swearing sometimes happens, and that's okay. I'm Samantha and Elvia, health and wellness coach, chronic overthinker, and proud BFFs to stress itself. Here we're ditching perfection, embracing unfiltered real talk, and making mindset shifts that might just keep us from screaming into the void. Let's get messy. On this episode, I'm joined by Elvia de Garza Morales, co-founder of DLG Research, to talk about something she's witnessed firsthand through her work with consumers, the stress people carry but don't talk about. We dive into how culture, family, gender expectations, and even gratitude can shape the way we express or don't express what we're feeling, particularly for Hispanic men. We also talk about how vulnerability and strength aren't opposites, and how simply creating a safe space for someone to talk can make a difference. Let's talk about it. Hi, Elvia. Welcome to the Stress Mess podcast. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since I've actually recorded a podcast. So I'm like, I don't even remember. Do I know how to do this stuff?
I bet you do. I bet you do. Well, thank you for having me, Samantha. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you because you have such an important topic that I would love to discuss because I think it has a lot to do. And, we're going to talk about cultures and, mental health and, all of those, well, I'm going to say like wonderful things that make us human, more than anything. But I'd love to kind of like dive right in. I'm going to start off with a question. So,
Okay.
well, first of all, tell us about yourself
Yes,
and then let's dive in.
of course. Well, I'm Elvia de Garza Morales. I'm the co-founder of DLG Research, which is a consumer research firm. We specialize in the Hispanic and multicultural consumer. And what that means is that we help brands understand consumers, not only what they buy, but the reason behind their decisions, the emotional drivers
The
that drive these
behaviors.
purchases. Yes.
Yeah.
And through this work, we obviously end up talking about people's lives and
Mm,
what they carry, what they struggle with, and often the stress they don't talk about.
yeah. What do you think is like the number one thing that you find as a struggle as far as like consumer behavior?
In general, right?
Yes.
Or specifically to the Hispanic
Let's,
consumer.
let's start with general and
Yes.
then we'll drill
Mhm.
down.
Well, since we talk about products and services, usually the struggle that often comes to the surface right away is financial struggles, right?
Mm,
They start talking about money and issues and affordability and all of that. So, that comes top of mind, especially when talking about products and services. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I can say that, I see a lot of that too, even with, people that I'm proposing my services to, is that I do find, some people, of course, struggle with the money. And I know that there's also this like view of money too. Like I grew up really poor. And so like the view of money is that money is scarce and, we have to be tight all the time. And then we have to, make sure that we're watching every single penny, and I kind of grew up that way. And so like I still kind of look at it that way. But then I also see like other entrepreneurs that are just like money, and they're so like free and to talk about money and they don't shy away from the subject of money. So I do find that it's like a stark contrast from like how I grew up and how I was raised, to now and the I guess the world that we're in, of
Yes.
entrepreneurs and, small businesses.
Definitely. And even I think with the younger generations, the way that kids talk about brands and money, and I mean, it's almost scary. And I mean, I remember growing up, and I probably you felt the same experience or you live the same experience, but I was really not thinking about brands, especially not expensive brands. Or you would think, but like, I don't know, it was not part of your everyday life. But
Yeah.
now my kids are into the Lululemon and it's all brands and expensive brands, but it's
Yeah.
part of their lives. And I guess, I mean, in a way, we struggle with that
Yep.
because we were brought up differently. Even if we can afford them, it's kind of like, you are 16, you shouldn't buy that 120 sweatshirt, right? And things like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Exactly. There's this huge concept, and my kiddo
Yes.
just had a birthday and got some money for his birthday, and that's one thing that is looking at the dollar amount and going, "Wow, that's a lot of money," and thinking, and he's being smart about it. He's kind of parceling it out, so he's not like he blew it on one big thing, but as he needs things or wants things, I should say,
Yes.
I give
Yes.
him his needs. Obviously, his wants, are from his birthday money, and so that's one thing I'm noticing that he's actually being smarter about it. Like, I think if
Yes.
I was a kid and I had that much money, I'd be like, "Oh, what's the biggest thing I can buy?" But, of course, money was scarce, for
I
me,
know. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. No, but talking about that, also kids also with so many access to information,
Yeah.
well, I'm generalizing, but I'm thinking of my son specifically. Like he loves to learn about finances, and I mean, he's only 15, and he's like, "Mom, can I invest some money?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, it's part of the process. I'm glad you are coming to me, or actually to his dad." Very young, but he's interested in that, and I think that is wonderful. And he actually tells me, "Mom, this is a subject that should be taught in school. It's very useful." And oh, do I agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that there's definitely a deficit of information, that is not presented in schools, like how to do your taxes,
Yes,
like things that
exactly.
you do because, like, even parents, could teach their kids. But the thing is that where did they learn? I mean, they learn from somebody else and it's like passed
Mhm.
down information,
And some
you know?
parents are not good at it.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
what are the kids going to learn? Yeah, I mean, definitely. There's a lot of opportunity there in schools, I think. But
Yes,
that's
definitely.
subject for another podcast, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm gonna say I do know a lot of nonprofits that go around to schools to be able to educate students, on different things,
Mhm.
including what we're gonna talk about, mental health,
Oh
because
yeah.
that's something that is definitely not taught in schools. We're taught the ABCs and the one, two, threes, but there's the basic information, but we're not taught about ourselves in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. Yeah, there's sex ed, but that's something like completely different. And I do notice like this because my kiddo did say this that the boys were not paying attention during female reproductive sexual education. But the same thing with the girls were not paying attention during the boys because they were paying attention to like, how do I know my body?
Mhm.
And, it's the same thing too when we talk about like mental health and, potentially, different genders or the spectrum of genders too,
Yes.
that we often don't pay attention
Mhm.
to what would be not our chosen gender, I suppose, as far as mental health.
No, definitely. And I mean, in talking about mental health, and
Mm.
I do focus groups and individual interviews, so I get to talk a lot with consumers, and I see a huge difference between men and women and talking about their feelings, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in every project, of course, we start talking about products or services, but to get to the juice, we talk about personal stuff, and I
Yeah.
start asking personal questions that might be simple, but men, as they start getting comfortable,
Mhm.
I can almost see how they are processing this information live. It's like
Yep.
as if they hadn't talked about it ever with anyone. And that is, it's something that it even though it happens often, it doesn't stop surprising me.
Yeah.
And I can see that women in general, they share their feelings with their friends, with their
Yep.
moms, with their kids. But men, you have to dig. And once they get in that safe space and they start sharing, you can see the physical reaction, their body language, and
Mm.
all of that, that tells me that they don't do this often.
Yeah. Yeah, very true, and I find it funny because I do have, I have a lot of guy friends, and
Mhm.
that's one thing that I will always ask them is, they're working on a project or, they're telling me something, and I'll say, "How do you feel about that?" And they'll do that pragmatic approach of, "Well, this is what's going on," and they'll give me the facts, right? But I'm like, "No, I wanna know, like, how do you feel about it? Are you excited about it? Like, are you disappointed?" Like, I want to know the feeling, behind what is driving you
Yes.
in that particular project, rather than what's going on in the project. Don't tell me the what,
Yeah,
tell me.
and it's almost as if you were speaking another language sometimes, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's like, what do
right.
you mean? What are you talking about? But once you get them talking, eh, you can see the impact that that can have and how
Yes.
that is processed. Because at the end of the day, what is not shared or what is not expressed can build up, inside and be
Yes.
a heavy load on your shoulders, I think.
Yeah, and that can be, in many different people, depending
Mhm.
on your personality type or depending on the
Yes.
situation, that could come out in several different ways. It could come out in a stress. I know for me, when I'm stressed, I become very nice, like, like overly nice. Like people will see, like, when if I like walk up to you and go, "Hi, how are you today?" And like, "Oh my gosh, let me get that for you," and everything. I'm stressed, like
Oh,
that's I don't know
wow,
that
wow. Okay,
information
that
like
is interesting.
I don't like yell or anything, like, I just become overly nice because I think, like, that's gonna kinda, like, mask my stress somehow. It's like but I know that's, like, not a typical response for a lot
Mhm.
of people because when you see people going through stressful situations, you often see them, getting short with people, you see them getting angry, you see them shutting down, there's all
Yes.
of those, sort of things, and, um, that's hard to see,
Mhm,
for when you're interacting with people and you're trying to get something done and somebody is stressed and
mhm, mhm.
they're acting in a way that's shutting down.
Yes, 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 definitely. And usually that is the reaction. I mean, the one that you have is not the norm. Usually, this, and again, it's different from men and women, I think. But in,
Yeah.
in general, yes, this shutting down and even sometimes aggressive behavior
Yes.
or just shut down, like you said, not really being present
Yep.
with the conversation. Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
definitely.
And when I do focus groups or interviews, they are not necessarily stressed at that time, right? It's
Mhm.
when I get to talk about different things, um, about their personal lives, about their struggles, and
Mm.
when I try to, get to understand, fully understand the person, that they and both men and women start talking about what worries them and what keeps them up at night and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but like I was telling you earlier, it is very interesting how men process it in the moment. It's like, oh, I didn't know I was feeling this. And very often I see that teary eye or the long pauses or how the voice get cut. And you know this is an example of stress they didn't know they had in them because
Yeah.
they were not aware at
Yeah.
all of the existence of this. Yes, yes, but as times goes, it creates a heavy load. And I can see as the conversation progresses how that person, like I said, it's not necessarily that they are mad when they start. No, it doesn't have to be like that. They are
Right.
normal polite people and that are having a conversation, but then at the end you see the body language that is like, oh my God, I just released some tension. And that
Mhm.
was not at all the purpose of the research. The group might be about cars or cell phones or any subject, but well, I get to witness how sometimes my sessions could be even unexpected therapy session, like
Oh,
super
yeah.
funny. But it happens. And even though my clients objectives are always the priority, I
Mhm.
love when this happens because I know how important it is to have that safe space to talk about your feelings and emotions, even in the most unexpected places like a focus group, right? So it is very important.
Yeah, very true. I mean, because when you're doing those focus groups, I'm assuming that you're establishing some kind of psychological safety, that
Hmm.
people can express how they feel, not the facts, but,
Hmm.
how they feel. And I do see that, like, there's this video that this dad was with the son and the daughter, and the son and daughter were probably like 3 and 4 years old, and there was this like huge bean bag or something like that, and they were taking the daughter and throwing her on the bean bag, but in a very gentle way. He was almost like guiding her, down to the bean bag, and then she would land and laugh, and he would pick her up and cuddle her and everything. But then take the boy and grab him by the ankles and just, like down and everything. And the boy would laugh, and then the dad would be like, okay, on to
Yes.
the girl, like, and then just kind of exchange. And you can definitely see that that's how a lot of people in society treat
Hmm.
people that identify, as female and male, that they treat them differently. Like men
Yes.
are not safe normally
Hmm.
to express feelings, and if they do, then they're soft,
Hmm.
and then for women, it's perfectly acceptable. I'm sure, like probably like 90% of the overthinkers are women,
Oh,
that are constantly thinking about how they feel about things. I'm not saying that's just a stereotype, I'm sure, but like it's that sort of thing that women have the safe space.
yes. I mean, and that, like you said, it happens from a very young age. I mean, our boys are taught to be, like you said, strong and act like a man.
Yes.
Act like a man. And what does that mean? I think there's a huge need and opportunity to normalize these
Yep.
conversations, and the conversation by itself is a way of strength. You know
Hmm.
to be able
Yeah.
to express what you're going through, that is an example of strength.
Definitely. And I don't think it's quite recognized, that
Hmm.
it is a sign of strength. That it is, like I said before, a kind of a sign of weakness,
Hmm.
expecting. But then again, like, people are ridiculed, too, for being overly emotional, even though it was safe to be, emotional.
Yes.
I apologize. My cat is just digging at something over there.
Yeah, no, I think there's, yeah. Vulnerability and resilience, or the fighting spirit, can coexist.
Yeah.
It's about that. It's not one replacing the other. They can coexist, or they should be able to coexist, right? And that
Yes.
should apply to both men and women. Um, um, for the sake of mental health.
Hmm.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so we're kind of dancing around it, of course, dancing around the subject of Hispanic men's,
Hmm.
mental health too. And, just to kind of give like the US perspective, on this too, for anybody that is actually
Hmm.
listening from another country. And that, is that, of course, in the 50s and 60s, we had the American dream, in the US. And, that was all about gaining status, gaining the luxurious things that we all wanted, nice house, nice car, all of that kind of stuff. And the US tends to not be so family oriented.
Hmm.
But I understand in the Hispanic culture, it's different. The culture is different. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's dive into the Hispanic men's mental health.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, the Hispanic family, the Hispanic culture is very centered in family, very centered in religion, very centered in community,
Mhm.
right? So, but the immigrants, when they come to this country, or Hispanics come to this country, but it's not only it's not only for Hispanics, it's in general.
Mm,
Obviously, you face isolation from the extended family. You face a new language. You try to provide in a new country for the family that you're very close to, right? So,
mhm.
I'm sure this applies to men in general. Men are often seen or feel they are the sole providers. That is their sole responsibility, and the need that they need to provide, and all of
Yeah.
that. That is also true for Hispanics. So I'm not saying one is facing this load differently than the other, but I do know that Hispanics handle this silently for the most
Mm,
part, right?
mm,
They don't express it, and that has to have or has to take a toll eventually, right? um you know beyond gender, Hispanics in general, like I said, the culture is centered in gratitude, for example, right? And sometimes, or very often, when you express struggle or complain, you feel, and by you I mean Hispanics might feel ungrateful. And even religion takes a role there, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm being ungrateful to God and what I have. So
mm,
there's this sense of I can't complain, I shouldn't complain. And don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer of positive thinking and positive affirmations and all of that, but not at the expense of mental health, right?
yeah.
And it's funny because in the Hispanic culture, there are a lot of jokes about this, about and memes about kids not being able to tell their parents they feel sad or they are depressed, or there's if there and I'm thinking of memes or the TikTok reels, that there are a lot of them about this, right? Like there's these kids saying, "Mom, I feel sad." No, don't do that. Go and get busy. Or, "Mom, I'm depressed." What? That doesn't exist. You are get find something to work. Go clean your room, and like, and in a way, this is true, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like there's no space to express. And I'm obviously generalizing, right? But culturally, this is very true. And I mean, it is in a way great because you find, I know the Hispanic culture, it's full of joy and resilience and hardworking, and all of these that can help you overcome any challenge, right? But at
Yeah.
the same time, it shouldn't be at the expense of mental health. I think, like I said before, there's room for both. There's you can have a joyful personality, you can have an optimistic view of life, but at the same time, you should be able to ask for help if you need to, or
Mm,
express a challenge if you need to, and just to talk about what you're feeling. And that doesn't make you less joyful or less grateful. So, yeah, I mean, that's why when going back to the focus groups and what I've witnessed, I see this struggle about, and this applies to both men and women,
yeah.
but it's even more so with men, right? Because on top of the religion and the grateful center culture and all of these, there's this macho view about them not being able to talk about their feelings, and them having to manage everything by themselves and in silence.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very interesting because you do bring up, like, some aspects of, like, toxic positivity, too, of, like, "Don't worry, everything's gonna be okay." And that's almost like a barrier, if you will, to being able to help people to open up to their feelings, to be able to have that safe space, because if somebody's gonna shut them down and maybe not validate their
Mhm.
feelings, but
Mhm.
of course, they don't wanna validate them too much, because if somebody is feeling depressed and they are having suicidal ideation and everything, of course, you don't wanna, like, sink down with them or anything like that. Of course, you wanna try to bring them out of that, but, there is, like, clinical depression, and then there's
Mhm.
like seasonal depression.
Yes.
There's, different types of depression and everything. And so, what do you find, like, as far as like the Hispanic culture, as far as like being able to um, express that like within their families versus like the external to their family? Do you see a difference there?
Well, again, talking about men and women, a woman, they do express it with friends. Like I in groups, what I've observed is that they say, well, I was talking to my friend about this or that. It's something that they talk
Mhm.
with their moms, if they have them here. uh, but men, very often, they don't even talk about this with their partners.
Yeah.
I mean, with their friends, not even think about it, but not even with their partners. So that's where the struggle is, right?
Mhm.
And like I said, very often they don't even know they have these feelings inside. Um, it- and I know this because when I ask and ask and ask, and I create this safe space for them, and
Yeah.
they start talking about it, I can, it's kind of like a realization of their feelings, live as we talk. Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. So what is that when they have that realization of their feelings and everything, what do you find the most useful from that within your research?
The most useful for them, I mean, really, oh, you mean, are you asking how to create that safe space, or what is useful for them once they
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how to create that safe space, and let's talk about what that looks like after you create the safe space and they actually open up.
Yes.
What do you find, from that?
Well, basically, as a focus group moderator, as an interviewer, I listen with no judgment. And that is key, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of not necessarily agreeing with them, it's just listen to what they have to say.
Mm.
And asking questions, not giving up at the first, how are you? Good, bad. You don't stop there. Like
Yeah.
you were saying earlier, not really tell me what you're really what you're going what's going on behind the product objectives, or whatever. It's just asking questions, and providing a judgment-free environment. That's
Mm.
really all it takes, right? And it might not be and I'm thinking outside the focus group, with a friend or with your brother or with your sons. It might not be an easy thing to do from one day to another. It might take practice.
Mhm.
uh, but I guess it is very important to provide for anyone, and especially for the boys in your life, or for the men in your life, that safe space, with no judgment, and with simply being there asking questions. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's good. And so what do you find like within your research, when you finally do get men to open up, and especially Hispanic men, to open up, what do you find is the most beneficial, from all of that?
Well, awareness is power, right?
Yeah.
I can think of so many stories, so many. I don't know. One that is coming to my mind is, I was talking to this group of men, and I asked them in particular, what does it mean to be far away from the rest of your family, right? And
Mm,
and and they started talking, and I say they because as one starts talking on, it's like a snowball of ideas, right? People start like, oh my God, I feel the same. Oh my God, I'm experiencing the same situation. But from that particular group, one thing that came out, that really stuck to me, it was all about the wives. They were like, oh my God, if I was living in Mexico or in El Salvador or in Guatemala, I would be the sole providers, then hang out with my friends, and really not see a lot of my family. But here my wife works as well, and I need to help her, and she needs to help me. And as
mm,
they were becoming aware of this, and well, it's not that they were not aware, but as they worked on putting it into words and explaining their current situation, you could see the gratitude they had for their wives and the team
Mm.
that they both create to provide for their families. So, I mean, to answer your question, I guess becoming aware of their emotions and expressing their emotions leaves them with knowing how to act. Like it kind of like it's turning on the light in a room, right?
Yeah,
And seeing things as they are.
yeah.
And I don't know, maybe obviously I cannot know what they did afterwards because I talk about that and then I end up talking about products and I move away perhaps from the emotional parts. But
Mhm.
you know, I can almost imagine that the following days, or they notice these things and now they are aware and they recognize them and they can be um, grateful for them or they can address them if there are challenges. Awareness, I mean, being aware of your emotions is the first step for everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Awareness. Awareness is the first step. And recognizing,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
accepting, those
Definitely,
are always the
definitely. So
first
yeah, I mean,
help.
like I said, it's not that I don't know what they do afterwards, but in the
Mhm.
moment,
Yeah.
I can see how they become aware of their emotions, they express them, and in many cases, like I said, with a teary eye or something, they acknowledge them and they continue the conversation, and
Mhm.
the most beneficial thing I think and I hope is that they know that they express their feelings and nothing happened. They are still
Yeah.
alive, they are not any weaker, they can still provide for their family. But yeah, I mean, it is wonderful every time that this happens, and I'm hoping, as they found as they found this safe space in a very unexpected way, because I'm sure they don't go into a focus group thinking they're going to talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
But I can only hope that they look for that safe space somewhere else.
Agreed. Agreed. So, what would you want to kind of leave the Stress Mess podcast audience with? Um,
Well, I would just say that stress isn't just what people go through, it's what they don't talk about.
mm.
And again, that creating that safe space for expression can be very powerful and impactful in their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I know I tell people this, stress in your body, if you are not releasing it in healthy ways, it's like, pressure to a coal. It, might create diamonds, with coal, but in your body, it actually creates worse
Mhm.
problems. So
Yes.
releasing your stress in healthy ways, like exercising, talking, crying, in
Mhm.
some cases, is good ways, to release that. And so, yes, definitely. Let's start here. Let's start this whole of encouraging people, to open up about their feelings.
Yes, yes. Well, and I guess from our point of view, I mean, I think we need to normalize emotional conversations, right? With
Yes.
our boys, with our men, and with people in general. We just
Hmm.
need to normalize this conversation. We
Definitely.
need to create this safe space that are free of judgment, so
Hmm.
that people can actually open up, especially men can feel safe talking about their feelings.
Yep.
And I mean, last but not least, I think we need to redefine, as I mentioned earlier, what strength looks like. Real strength can also include being able to express what you feel and the struggles you're carrying,
Yep.
because vulnerability and strength can coexist.
Definitely. Well, good.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for bringing all of your wisdom, to the podcast, and being able to kind of help us to open our eyes, to hopefully it's opened some people's eyes, to this subject a little bit more. So, thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Um, yes.
Well, thank you for having me. And well, if you can find me on LinkedIn, And also, if people want to find out more about what we do, you can also go to our website, dlgresearch.com. Thank you for having me, Samantha.
Wonderful. I will put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.